Hello, BookTube. The lights are going out all over BookTube. We are playing with fire. We are tempting fate. We are dancing on the edge of the precipice. And whatever other book reviewer cliches you want to add on here. This is a book haul, but it is not an unprovoked book haul. It is not an innocent book haul. I watched young Denson at Robin Song Reads. He did a book haul. Big, boisterous, happy book haul in his little elven boudoir with the leaves and the fairy lights and the piano and whatnot. It was a great book haul. I loved it. I'll leave a link to it down below. And he was, in the middle of that book haul, he was talking about, I think, the Silmarillion. When suddenly he stopped and he looked directly at the camera and his voice changed and he said, "Oh, and by the way, Steve is a low-T beta male soy boy." And then he resumed his perky demeanor and kept talking about books. And I thought, oh, that's kind of odd. That's not the way he usually talks. And can it really be true? I mean, all the bro influencers who are out there, none of them have ever faced a polar bear in the wild. None of them have ever faced grizzly bears in the wild or fought a man they didn't know in a bar in the middle of a jungle. To say nothing of moose. But he's entitled to his opinion. It just seemed a little odd. That's all. And I didn't think anything of it. And then in my BookTube feed, Joseph Reads Books did a video, cropped up, also a book haul. So that's starting to elevate tensions right there. That's starting to look a little bit like an arms race. And we've been through this before on this channel. We've gone through haul wars before. We want to avoid them. It leaves scorched earth and weeping widows behind. But I wasn't overblowing things. It's just a book haul. They don't coordinate with each other that I know of. So just sit back and enjoy it. And he was in the middle of talking about something, Gray Man, I think it was, when suddenly his voice changed and he looked directly at the camera and he said, "Steve is a low-T beta male soy boy." And then his voice resumed normal and he went right on with his book haul. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. And this is starting to get under my skin. It's starting to feel a little personal. I mean, what are the odds that both he and Robin Song Reads would say the exact same thing? And I didn't really understand it. But I thought nothing of it, and I enjoyed his book haul, and I'll leave a link to it down below. And then all of a sudden, that reading guy did a book haul. Another huge book haul. So this is definitely starting to look like the beginning of by proxy brush wars that may lead to a worldwide conflagration. And he was in the middle of his book haul. It's wonderful. He also went to some sort of library sale when suddenly in the middle of it, his voice changed and he looked directly at the camera and he said, "Steve is a low-T beta male soy boy." Only he said beta mall and CB because he literally can't pronounce anything. But still, the sentiment got across. And I thought, all right, something's going on here. These people aren't just hauling books. They're also hurling taunts. They're daring me to go on a book haul of my own. But I still thought, no, you're probably imagining things. I mean, yes, that weird interjection right in the middle of their videos about my T count is a little strange. Certainly seems a little taunting, but it doesn't necessarily mean what you think it means. And then, the final straw. Then, young Denson at Robin Song Reads did a second book haul. One day after his previous one. This time with his father, who I have not seen since both of us flew combat missions over the Vietnam a long, long time ago. They were a charming video together where they are talking again about the same library sale that Denson raided the day before. And it's wonderful watching the dynamic between father and son. Not an ounce of fat between either one of them. Some genetic packages are just fairer than others. But I was watching that book haul when at one point in the middle of their talk, they both stopped, they looked at the camera together, and in unison said, "Steve is a low-T beta male soy boy, ... because he hasn't hauled books in a week. So finally I had the explanation. Finally I knew what all the others were talking about. Apparently I am a low T beta male soy boy because I took the week off from book hauling. I did that because the high temperature in Boston for the day was 3 degrees. So if I had gone to the Brattle bookshop, which has an outdoor sale lot, I would have frozen my giblets off, and I may need them someday. It's not likely, but I might. But when you have this kind of concerted effort along the Maginot line, you cannot ignore it. So I have a book haul for you. Today I went out to the Brattle bookshop in downtown Boston, and I got a pile of books that I want to show you. And I also want to point out, not making any kind of a veiled threat here, I'll point out to all of my young would-be antagonists that the last time there was a haul war on BookTube, it was, who was it? It was Mark Richardson. It was Jason Harrigan. I think there was one other participant in those book hauls, and I received a bevy of white flags. I won in the end. Nothing beats the Brattle. But I thought I would point that out to these young whippersnappers who are threatening all of BookTube with a resumption of haul wars. Do we really want that kind of carnage? We'll see. If they are foolhardy enough to throw down the gauntlet, so be it. Oh no, it was Aaron Facer. Aaron Facer was the last person to try and kick off haul wars. Well, it's not going to work, okay? But anyway, I went to the Brattle and I got a pile of books. It wasn't quite as cold this morning. It was all the way up to 20 degrees Fahrenheit, which sounds really cold to those of you who are in normal parts of the world, but it is 20 degrees warmer than it has been for the last 10 days, so I was willing to take it. And I got a bunch of stuff that I want to show you for my own book haul. We're not calling it Haul Wars. Nothing's been declared yet. It's entirely possible that we can de-escalate. It's entirely possible. But anyway, I got an old Penguin book. Not a Penguin classic, but Penguin from their travel and adventure line. They're short-lived, but very good travel adventure line. This is From Red Sea to Blue Nile by Rosita Forbes. This is basically her traveling through Abyssinia in the late 1930s, I think 1938, and writing on what she sees. So she's in the company almost exclusively of men. She's going to a whole bunch of places that usually have never seen a Western woman. Some places, famously, she has to hide the fact that she's a Western woman. And I've never read this. I've read her famous book, but I've never read this one. And I think she's long since out of print, and I might have stumbled on the reason why. I want to read you just one passage here. We will move on. Of course, I'll read the whole book, and I'll really enjoy it. But let's see. There's a yes. Here we go. This is from the author's preface. Obviously, Abyssinian rule, as I saw it, had no virtues except that of personal generosity stretched to the point of charity. It did not breed or even preserve a fine race, if such ever existed in Ethiopia. The Christianity of the empire had been perverted by superstition. It was a bastard religion without redeeming qualities. Greed, sickness, poverty, and dirt reigned supreme in these villages. At best, one could say of the Abyssinian that he was an engaging rogue, a liar and an amusing storyteller. There were occasions on which he proved himself a good companion, and his hospitality was prodigious, but only with the complete reconstruction of his framework of life, possibly under European rule, could he approach being a satisfactory individual, judged by any code. Okay. All right, so that's on page what? 1? So that's how you're introducing your book about the place you're about to travel through with your pinky in the air and a disaffected mew on your face the whole time. So this is going to be a hoot. I don't know that I'm going to keep it, but it's going to be a hoot to go through. Then I found a book. This has always interested me. This is The Gaudy by Macintosh Stewart. This is by The Gaudy by J. Stewart. It is the first book in a series of books. I forget how many books were in it. It's A Staircase in Surrey is the name of the series. All set around Oxford. All about Oxford. Dramatizing Oxford. Very much a prototypical British novel in series like The Avenue or the C.P. Snow books, or, of course, the most famous one being Pohl's book, Dance to the Music of Time. Very much along those lines. And I think I read this series once upon a time, a long time ago. I remember almost nothing about it. A surefire yardstick for me that it's time to reread a book or say that I haven't read it is if I can't remember the main protagonist's name. And the main protagonist in this book has a distinctive name, but I can't remember it. Actually, well, let's see. Yeah, Duncan Petullo. I did not remember that. So it may be that I need to reread. I certainly want to reread at least this first one. The Brattle had in these old, who is this? Methuen paperback? Yeah, in these old Methuen paperbacks, the Brattle had this book and the final book in the series. I did not get the final book in the series because I didn't want to condemn myself to decades of fruitlessly hunting for the ones that I don't have and forgetting which ones I do have. So I just got the first one. That's easy enough to remember. But the thing that now interests me, I think when I read these it didn't, but now it does, for reasons we may not get into, is the effect of writing under a pseudonym. Of course, I know almost nothing about writing under pseudonyms. What on earth are you implying? But this author wrote a whole bunch of books under his own name, including a whole bunch of literary studies that I have never seen in a used bookstore. I would love to get one of them. I've read some of them from libraries, and they're really good. But he also wrote a whole bunch of books, 50 years worth of books, mystery novels, under the name Michael Innes, starring Appleby, I think was the name of his main character. I love those books. Just love them. I've recommended them on this channel many times on March Mystery Madness and off. And yet I remember that all of his novels, not the literary criticism, but that all of his novels are unbelievably boring. They aren't they're anywhere near as good as the books he wrote under his pseudonym. And you might say, I mean, this book, for instance, if I remember correctly, it's been a while, so I might not, is just someone reminiscing about Oxford. Goes there after years of being away. He's an older man now, meets a whole bunch of people that he knew then. Basically, whatever happened to so-and-so for the whole length of a novel, which you'd have to be pretty dumb to think is a good premise for a novel anyway. I don't remember this being interesting at all. It was $1. That's why I got it. But I find it fascinating that people who don't do any writing especially will often think, well, a pseudonym is just because you want to write something without putting your name on it. But it won't change what you write. It's only one thing you could write. And I don't know that that's true. The more I think about it, the more I wonder about the psychological prospect of writing under a pseudonym. The Michael Innes books are much better than I remember this being. So I'm going to give this a try just in case the more erudite Michael Innes, the Appleby mysteries are always cited for their erudition, for their literary learning and whatnot. Maybe there's a lot of that going on here that I just missed the first time I read it. It was a long time ago, so I'll give it a try. But it's got me thinking. Perhaps a Steve reads essay under my own name about the freeing effect of writing under a pseudonym, about what that means. That might be interesting to do. But we have one other mass market paperback. I got this as a kind of a fig leaf in my attempt to calm the hall wars before they burst into flame again. In one of his videos, Robin Song Reads showed a couple of Signet classics. They are wonderful. These old Signet classics were really good. And I found one, a perfect condition thing of Last of the Mohicans. And I have this already, but I'm perfectly happy to get another copy just in case. I'll reinforce it just a bit. I'll put a crease of tape in there to try and keep the cover attached. Same thing with the back cover. I love this. Of course, I love this novel completely. And also, as a rare treat, years ago, Mark at Book Time with Elvis and Micah Cummins and I did a read aloud, chapter by chapter. We rotated between us of Dracula. And when I got to a certain chapter of Dracula, I read the corresponding number chapter of Last of the Mohicans instead. This scene. And I loved it. I had a blast doing it. And I got a number of comments from people. First of all, a lot of people said, well, what the hell is this? This isn't the next chapter of Dracula. But a lot of people noticed what I was doing, understood from the names in the chapter exactly which book I was reading from, and commented, well, when I read this, it was for school, and it struck me as the most boring thing in the world. It's all a diction from another age. But when you read it, suddenly I liked it. Suddenly I realized you pointed out that the passage that you were reading was thrilling. And God, if I didn't see it. I didn't see it when I read it on my own, but when you read it, I did see it. I found that very touching. Cooper and I go back a long way, so I found that very touching. Then we have... there's a couple more paperbacks, but this is a little hardcover. This is Damascus Under the Mamluks, part of the Centers for Civilization series that I've never seen this thing in the wild. This particular edition. I have a lot of books in this series. Of course, my favorite one, actually, one of the ones in this series that really does stand out as a book. And I'm not just saying that. I'm a little bit invested personally in the book, but it's Boston in the Age of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. That book in this series really does stand out. It need not be true that it stands out in my mind because it was written by an old friend. That need not be true. It's also, I believe, a really good book. But there are lots of others. Yeah, here we go. Because I don't have a lot of these. I have Athens in the Age of Pericles. I have Constantinople in the Age of Justinian. I don't have Rome in the Augustan Age. I don't have the one about Antioch in the Age of Theodosius the Great. I don't have the Dublin volume, Dublin in the Age of William Butler Yeats and James Joyce. Gaza in the early 6th century. I bet that's collectible now. And for the tragic reasons, but I don't have that. I don't think I've ever even read it. Istanbul and the Civilization of the Ottoman Empire I've read, but I don't have. Thebes in the time of Amenhotep III, I believe I have that. And the list on the back here doesn't even include Boston in the Age of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. It doesn't even include it. So the series went on. Like, for instance, that list also doesn't include Florence in the Age of Dante. And I really like this series. I've never read an entry in it that I didn't... Oh, the schmutz on the cover here. I spent a lot of time cleaning these books before I got on camera because, of course, all of Denson's books were absolutely beautiful. They were just completely pristine copies. But I didn't get them all. I will get that schmutz off there. An alcohol wipe will get rid of that if I'm really careful without wearing a hole in the cover. Let's see. Then some science fiction. Trade paperback of Red Moon by Kim Stanley Robinson. I love Kim Stanley Robinson. I think this author is fantastic. Red Moon is a hoot. It's got high-flying philosophical imperatives all through it. Like, Kim Stanley Robinson is a big writer. Big themes weave in and out of the book, but this author never forgets to entertain. And this is actually a whodunit, a murder mystery, a thriller, wrapped in the trappings of science fiction on a lunar colony. And the science fiction, the science underlying what it would take to make a working colony on Earth's moon is very well done throughout this book. It was fine, but I read it when it first came out. I don't think I reviewed it. I'm certainly not blurbed on it. When did this come out? 2018. I read it. I got the copy from the publisher and read it. I liked it a lot, but I haven't read it since then, and it's worth a reread. This author is very much worth a reread, and also I have a long-standing fascination with Earth's moon, so that would almost do it anyway. Then this other trade paperback. This is a Penguin trade paperback that I don't know what the story with this is. I really don't. I thought sure that I reviewed this, but I am blurbed on it, okay. But not by name. But Christopher Hitchens is blurbed by name. This is Arthur Conan Doyle, A Life in Letters. And it is terrific. I love the project of Life in Letters, where you tell someone's biography by including a lifetime worth of letters with exposition in between. I love that approach. It takes a real sure hand. You really have to know what you're doing. And I thought that this did that. The minute I saw it at the shop this morning, I thought, okay, why don't you still have that? Why would you get rid of it? But I could say that about a lot. I had this thing. Why did I ever get rid of it? Why did I do that? no idea. So I saw this and grabbed it right away. This is going to be a lot of fun, including for March Mystery Madness. Then this next one. I've mentioned on this channel many times that I have a sweet tooth for UK trade paperbacks. I don't know why. Something about the size and shape of them, the way they fit in the hand, I just love them. I indulge that sweet tooth so much that I will buy a book if it's in a UK trade paperback, even if I'm not all that sold on the book, or I've never heard of it. I'll take a wild chance on it if I am. So how much more thrilling to find a UK trade paperback of a book I love. I found The Cold 6000 by James Ellroy in this Century Books. This just a gray tone picture of an old Las Vegas. How incredible. This is a thematic, I guess you could call it a sequel to American Tabloid, but it would be wrong to call it that because you don't need to read American Tabloid, much less love it, to read this and love it. This is a harder book to love. It's a harder book just in general. It is a brutal book. But it's told in that staccato style that Ellroy was just starting to perfect in American Tabloid. Here, it's the apotheosis of that style. It's a little bit heretical to say, I know, with all the others out there, the Black Dahlia or American Tabloid, but I think this is the best thing he ever wrote. And I love it. Just love it. A whole bunch of very different men converging on a city in the immediate aftermath of the assassination of JFK, where there's a lot more violence to dole out, both government sanctioned and not. There's the main character here is a good guy, at least allegedly a good guy, but the most absorbing character in the book is a bad guy, a very bad guy, a big tank of a monster that you can't stop reading about. He fascinates you throughout the whole book, but you don't ever like him. And let's just say one part of this thing has a standard James Ellroy kaleidoscopic ending. But one aspect, one little shard of that kaleidoscopic ending is very satisfying. Dealing with that one character. But if ever I needed an inducement to reread this book, this is it. I was so happy to see this. And then we have a bunch of hardcovers. Like, for instance, the Signet Classic was my attempt at an olive branch to Robin Song Reads, so that we don't kick off Hall Wars 2025. It was a bit of an olive branch because he did a few. And the same thing is here. I did an olive branch for Joseph Reed's books. I got Mystic River by Dennis Lehane in a nice hardcover. The Brattle right now is swimming in this kind of book. The latest talked about thing from the biggest talked about name only 15 years ago. It's been absolutely bizarre. I thought it shook me to my core, and I thought I was done with being shaken, but it's still shaking me. I had a conversation with my friend Zach about it just today in a video that I'll post for this channel. But I think I need to write about it again as well and really get to the bottom of it. These books were fanfared. They were on the New York Times bestseller list. They were talked about by critics, not always by me. In fact, usually not by me, but still. Those critics scarcely had a negative word to say. And yet, what would those critics have honestly been saying about any of this stuff? That it's dross? That it's dried straw that's going to be in the fire tomorrow? That no one cares about it? In 99.9% of the cases, the books that I've seen so far, yes, that is true. I'm not sure that it's true of Dennis Lehane. I'm actually not sure that it is. I think he might live and be... I could see someone doing a 30-year anniversary or something like that, reprint of a uniform set of Dennis Lehane's book. I could see that happening. And Mystic River is very good. It's the story of three young boys in Boston, and an outrageous tragedy just impinges in on their lives when they're just living their ordinary young, innocent young boy lives. And then it impinges out again. And then the narrative jumps forward to them as adult men. And there's a story. There's actually a really good thriller plotline here. But a large part of the book is rather refreshingly taken up with just the after effects of that weird impingement of bizarre, predatory tragedy. And it's done sensitively. It's done really well. One character in particular, but it's done really well. And also has something I often criticize contemporary fiction for, but never Dennis Lehane. I never criticize him for it. It has a humdinger of an ending. There's a two-note ending, a major note and a minor note, and both of them are done perfectly, and they're both done perfectly in relationship to each other. So I don't have a collection of Dennis Lehane. You'd think I would, for a whole bunch of reasons. You'd think I would. I don't. I think this might be the only Dennis Lehane that I own. I get it all, I read it all, and out it goes. But I thought a peace offering was in order to stop violence from breaking out. We don't want to descend into hall wars and drag all the rest of you in when you've got other things to do and not exactly rolling in extra money. But if hall wars start, you will be obliged to go and do a book haul. No one wants that. No one wants to be pulling in all the city-states of our little corner of booktube just because that reading guy and Joseph reads books and Robin Song reads are itching and saber rattling. Just because they're doing that is no reason for... I'm hoping for the best. I'm hoping for the best. All of the rest of these next three are biographies, and all of them are rebuys. They're all things that I've read. But this first one, I have owned it many times. Every time I mention it on this channel, in trade paperback or in hardcover, immediately a hand goes up and somebody wants it. And I am learning, as I learned with tech, so I am learning with books, that the key is not for that to stop happening. The key is to adjust my attitude, which is as simple as that. Most of the time when people put their hand up because I show them a book that they want, they hit the old song and dance, the old waterworks about how, I live in a book desert. I'm 500 miles from the nearest civilization. Even the hydrants don't have water. I can't get a book. I'm afraid to shop online. If you would, please. That's going to work on me to an extent, but this isn't heart surgery. This isn't urgent. So the key mental adjustment is that when somebody does that for a book, I can say to them, absolutely, I will find you a copy. I have access to a really good, very, very, very active used bookstore. I will certainly see a copy of that book before you do. So I will find you a copy and send it, but I won't send you my copy. I won't do that anymore. I'm thinking a cut down on post-buy regret if I stop doing that. It's just, there's a reflex in me that when somebody wants a book, my reflex is to get it to them as fast as possible. I just need to get over that. That's all. So this is Godfrey Hodgson. This is a biography of Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the gentleman from New York. And that is Daniel Patrick Moynihan on the cover there. I don't imagine that a biography of Moynihan could be done any better than this. I really don't. This plus the big volume of collected letters of Moynihan. He was a very, very good snail mail correspondent. Is really all you need on this figure. That and maybe a little reading elsewhere in U.S. presidential administrations, for instance. Moynihan is largely forgotten now, of course, but once upon a time he was famous for a whole bunch of things, but mainly for something that became known as the Moynihan Report that he did in 1965 about the Negro household, about black families in urban cities. And it was incendiary. It got everybody talking. A lot of people mischaracterized it, but it got everybody talking. He was also a professor and an ambassador and a representative, the gentleman from New York. He was also an elected representative for a long, long time, and an entirely memorable person. A thinker on his own, an entirely memorable person. And as far as I can tell, he has a singular distinction in American history, apart from all of that and how wonderful he was. As a singular distinction, there's a thing that I've been saying about U.S. President Richard Nixon since Nixon was in office, and certainly immediately after he left office. I have been saying something about him over and over again, which is that much like Hitler, his evil stains the people who had anything to do with him, and therefore it stretches on long after him. His evil can stay long after him. So even when he himself has gone off to California to write boring articles for a Red Book, you'll still have a Pat Buchanan. You'll still have a Roger Stone. You'll still have his iniquity stretches its fingers, just like Hitler's did, and still does to this day. And when I acknowledged that decades and decades ago, this we're talking about long before most of you were born, in editorials, when I acknowledged that, I often flatly pronounced that everyone who touches pitch is defiled. And that is not true. Daniel Patrick Moynihan worked for Richard Nixon and was not defiled. Remained not only a good man, but in my opinion, a very good man. I know that there are a lot of people who will disagree with me. The aforementioned Christopher Hitchens would disagree with me, of course, because of Moynihan. Moynihan took a position on East Timor that really bothered Hitchens and bothered me, but not as much. And there are people who say he was not even a good man, much less a very good man. I disagree. So I'm this is a very good biography. It is very affectionate, but it is also very fair. It doesn't pull any punches with the man's shortcomings or short-sightedness. So I'm happy to have it. It is a classic of a biography. All three of the biographies I got today are classics. It's just I'm going to adjust my attitude. That's all. I'm not going to adjust my generosity. I will still find you anything you want. I will still buy it. I will still pay for postage and the fastest postage I can get. I will still do all of that. Absolutely. But not my own copy. I'm going to hold on to this copy. And then the last two biographies, one will be familiar to anybody, even people who don't read biography. The others, they're both really good. They have something in common that they don't share with this book, The Gentleman from New York. They have something in common, both of these. A couple of things in common. One is that they fit from March of the Mammoths. They're both huge books. Huge biographies, which I love. I'm perfectly willing to admit. I love huge biographies. The other thing they have in common is that their subjects are a subject I don't like. And you might, if you were, I don't know, a whittle baby, you might think, well, if you don't like the subject, why would you read an enormous book about the subject? I don't like Nazism. I've read thousands of books on the Third Reich. It's a silly question. Of course, I'm preaching to the choir here. In this corner of BookTube, we already know it's a silly question. It's a matter of how well the book is done. So I found two mammoths from March of the Mammoths. One is Jackson Benson's gigantic book, The Adventures of John Steinbeck, Writer, which I found in this enormous hardcover, and I veered against it at first because Penguin Classics did a big fat trade paperback of this, and I really liked it. In fact, once upon a time, I wrote about it. A long time ago, I wrote about it. God knows if that is findable. I don't know if David Murphy can find that. If he can, then he will. But I wrote a little thing about the paperback. And every once in a while in a used bookstore or thrift shop, I will see this thing and I will think, well, I want it because it's a brilliant biography, the John Steinbeck biography. There will be no others. In fact, I was another Kennedy person because the thing that I first became aware of Moynihan because he was a junior G grade, slick black hair, over-intellectualized staff member in the Kennedy administration. That's how I first became aware of this person. And that you'll find, I know, dead Romans, dead Kennedys, and dogs. You'll find it's true that almost everything that I know through the lens of the Kennedy administration. And when I say that there'll never really be a better biography of John Steinbeck, I'm often reminded of a person, again, I knew through the Kennedy administration, who blurbed this book by saying that not only will there never be a better Steinbeck biography, but there'll never be a need for one. I tend to agree with that. I don't usually say that sort of thing, right? The world is infinite. A better writer could come along, you'd like to think, and do a better job. I can't think how this could be bettered. And when I saw it today, this morning, I realized I had that same reaction. The trade paperback is what I want. And I thought, why is that? The trade paperback would fall apart. This is too big a book to have a trade paperback. So I got the hardcover, which I can stick things in. I can stick reviews in it. And also, it's very much tempting for March of the Mammoths. I haven't reread it since it was issued by Penguin in that trade paperback. And then the final thing, another huge book on a person I don't like. This one is so well known that it needs no introduction. I don't currently have a copy because every time I hold it up, somebody wants it. And I will certainly find you a copy, but it won't be this copy. This is, of course, David McCullough's biography of Harry Truman. Gigantic thing that shows there you've got the beak-like profile and then the humble beginnings and the White House on the cover there. And the author looking a little bit smug, as you would too. This is clearly David McCullough's magnum opus. It is like everything else this author wrote, really, really readable all the way to the end. I think it was probably outsold by his John Adams book. I think the John Adams book probably outsold anything. Not just because it was half this length, but also because it was made into a TV series. And it became really... He wrote 2 massively popular presidential biographies. This one and the John Adams book. There was a drastic difference between the two, of course, because I love John Adams and I hate Harry Truman. But I just yesterday talked about Dean Acheson, who really loved Harry Truman, not only professionally, not only as a boss, but also as a person. And I'm willing to give this another try. I've read this book twice, but for March of the Mammoths, I might read it a third time. It's tough. It's unfair, I always say, to reduce anyone's life to just one moment. But sometimes your life does reduce to just one moment. Ask Bill Buckner, if you don't believe me. Sometimes your life does reduce to just one moment. I'm not sure that it's true or fair to say that that happens with Harry Truman. But he dropped atomic bombs on not one but 2 cities full of people, full of innocent people, full of women and children and old people. He knew perfectly well what was going to happen. He knew exactly what would happen. Nobody knew exactly what was happening. But he knew perfectly well that he had another option, which is to pick an atoll out in the South Pacific, blow it into composite atoms in front of the watching world, and then say to the war party in Japan, if you don't surrender, I'll do this to your island. I'll pick a couple of cities. You're completely defenseless from my Air Force. I'll pick a couple of cities and literally incinerate them. I won't be knocking down a couple of buildings. I'll be momentarily visiting the surface of the sun in the middle of one of your cities. And you now see that I can do it. So surrender, or else. That ultimatum was never given because he wanted to use this weapon in war in order to show the Soviets what it could do. That's reprehensible. That is as bad a war crime, I think, as any other leader in World War II. I'm going to try to get over that. McCullough deals with that decision really well in this book. He is not a partisan hack at all. It is intelligently done throughout. And maybe it's high time that I stopped, that I got off that one point. It's a major point, but maybe it's time that I got off that one point and enjoyed this book for all the rest of what it does. A lot of people have read this book who never thought they would read an 1,100-page presidential biography, and they really liked it. March of the Mammoths might be the time for that. So there you go. That is a Peace in Our Time book haul. I'm hoping for peace in our time. There is rumbling along the Siegfried line, and I'm hoping we can contain it. I'm hoping that it can be contained. Austin at Outer World Media just did a book haul, a really good one, full of Westerns for June on the Range. But maybe he didn't know. Maybe it wasn't coordinated. Maybe no one will do any more book hauls this weekend. It could be. Anyway, I certainly will not be doing a book haul until next week. When warmer temperatures are predicted. I don't know if it'll happen. A part of me that has been cold for 2 months now refuses to believe it will happen, but it is predicted that the daytime high temperature in 5 days at the least will be 50 degrees higher than it has been. So that will be conducive. But I don't mean to add to the aggression here. So that's our weekend book haul. Went on a Saturday. We have David McCullough's Truman, well known, hardly needs introducing to any of you. Then The True Adventures of John Steinbeck, writer. So 2 tomes for March of the Mammoths. We have The Gentleman from New York, about Daniel Patrick Moynihan. We have Mystic River by Dennis Lehane. We have The Cold 6000 by James Elroy in a UK trade paperback. How incredible. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Life and Letters in this Penguin trade paperback. Red Moon by Kim Stanley Robinson. Not a major operatic thing, but always great. This author is always great. Damascus Under the Mamluks in the Centers for Civilization series. The Last of the Mohicans by James Fenimore Cooper. The Gaudy by the guy who wrote under the name Michael Innes when he wrote good books. And finally, From Red Sea to Blue Nile by Rosita Forbes. Travel writing from a bygone era. Travel writing where in her introduction, not only is she saying that the people in these Ethiopian villages are just benighted beyond all recognition, but also saying that There's hope on the horizon because maybe the civilizing influences of fascist Italy will help to save the day. In 1939, she's saying this. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now. That is a book haul in what we're still calling the phony book wars, the phony haul wars. We do not want this to kick off into a booktube-wide conflagration, if we can help it. Anyway, hoping so. So I'll wrap this up for now peacefully, and I'll see you all soon. Thank you, BookTube.